the heart of Pennsylvania, whose poetry she conveys so well, in Kutztown, home of Kutztown University, today lives one of America's most appealing artists, Mary Grace Wible. Now in retirement, she has devoted her entire life to teaching. Although she showed an early interest in drawing, her father, a teacher himself, did not encourage her to take courses in art education, which at the time he considered unsuitable for a teaching career. And so, at the age of 18, she became an elementary school teacher instead. At this point in her career, she had little time to paint. But soon she decided that, after teaching all year long, she would take art courses at the university during summer vacation. It took her 9 years, but at the age of 28, she had her bachelor's degree, and 4 years later she completed her master's. From this time on, she taught art, first at a state college, then at various universities. In the face of all kinds of difficulties, Mary Grace Wible never became discouraged. To increase her income, which in the teaching field, after the crash of 1929, had been reduced by 10%, she worked as a waitress in a restaurant. During the war, in order to participate in the national effort, she spent 2 summer vacations in a munitions factory, where she handled armored tank treads, weighing 65 pounds. The following summer, she was put in charge of a huge crane. At the university, her reliable character brought her to positions of responsibility. At times she had as many as 50 teachers under her supervision. In 1953, she agreed to come to Kutztown to teach at the college, which in time became Kutztown University. She has lived in Kutztown ever since. But here as elsewhere, her professional life demanded all of her time, with the exception of a sabbatical leave in 1961, during which she took a trip around the world. It was extremely difficult to find the time to paint. She captures the enchanting light of a summer's day on a grain field, while wildflowers contend with one another in the foreground. She shows the bleakness of Hawk Mountain, not far from Kutztown, which she depicts in a rather cold tonality, using gray and green. The phantom silhouette of a barn, looming out of the ochre light of an autumn evening. But she is equally adept at rendering the shimmering, calm flow of a river, in which a wooded area finds its reflection. And when autumn comes, her palette becomes alight with a profusion of color, always controlled with an unfailing sense of taste. Then, in a carefully balanced composition, we see a trail or a path wind its way through an admirable harmony, in which the entire gamut of red ochres is used with a range of the subtlest greens. Then we see a stream, whose bluish reflection of the sky, lined with white birch trunks, sets into vibration a symphony of foliage in reds. Or it is the vibrant intensity of a maple, which seems to want to attract all the attention, to the detriment of the bridge, and so to become the main subject of the painting. Perspective, we come across a river in a symphony of browns, punctuated with the red of what probably is a maple. A picture like this one reveals most fully her gifts as a colorist, in the alliance of the happy harmony of browns and the subtle, delicate green of the shadows on the snow. The anecdote in this painting is particularly strong, with the typical and familiar barn decorated with hex signs. But it is, above all else, a pretext to facilitate the cold harmony of the pinks and grays with a light yellow touch, which gives this watercolor all its beauty. Here we again find an atmospheric composition in which Mary Grace excels. Again, only a tree and some grass stand out with precision. Everything else is silhouette, sometimes well-defined, sometimes not. All the poetry comes from the backlighting, which bathes the distance in an icy mist, and from the snow, whose heaviness is rendered with remarkable concreteness. With quite a different technique, Mary Grace has treated this glistening, snow-covered woodland scene. Once again, in a backlighting, which filters through the leaves, the rendition of the dazzling snow's heaviness is quite remarkable. The reflection of the sky in this stream, winding its way through the snow, gives this scene its cold tonality, in spite of the efforts of a pale winter sun. Mary Grace Wible has traveled extensively, both at home in the United States and abroad. In 1969, the rugged coast of Maine inspired several vigorous works of considerable contrast. The waves on the rocks. She creates here, with a dazzling technique, works charged with sea foam. The cries of gulls, the sound and the feel of the open sea. At low tide, certain inlets seem to become patches of ground soaked with rain. Impressed by the desolate charm of this sight, Mary Grace Wible painted the same subject 3 times, several years apart. This building on a landing in Rockport, a small New England fishing village, was famous throughout the entire United States. The only way to get there was by boat. A number of artists were inspired to draw it before it was finally destroyed by a storm. Twice, in very different atmospheric moods, Mary Grace Wible also was inspired to paint this site. The little boat no longer assures the shuttle service today and seems a bit restless. Mary Grace captured it as though it was admiring its own reflection narcissistically in the water of the port. Next, the volcanic island of Bora Bora, seen from another island nearby. In the Polynesian light, the volcano of Bora Bora takes on a rosy tint. This is a building typical of the hotel where she stayed in Tahiti. In the Philippines, temple at dusk, treated with a sobriety which accentuates its mystery. Then it is Peking with the Temple of Paradise. Today a museum, it is from here once a year that the emperor left to pray for the harvest. Peking again, the Great Square and the Forbidden City, which today has also become a museum. Inside the Forbidden City, the Palace of the Concubines, a tea plantation. They have been growing tea here for 1,000 years. The mature leaves are picked by hand, one by one, every day. One plant is capable of producing tea leaves for 100 years. Upon return to the United States, these 2 imaginary landscapes also seem to show the influence of Eastern art. From Europe, Mary Grace Wible brought back this Orthodox church on Mykonos. This is a curious bridge from Mostar in Yugoslavia, the Spanish city of Toledo. Again, more windmills from Portugal. Sailboat in the Bay of Acapulco. Not completely satisfied with it, she did a second version of the same subject later the same day. On the California coast, she was particularly impressed with the form of the trees on Monterey Peninsula. Here the wind blows violently from the Pacific, bringing with it the ocean spray, heavy with salt. Under this constant conveys here with all the analytical precision of a redoute. Her last major trip took her to Alaska. She arrived there in the month of June. There is a perfect adequacy between Mary Grace Wible's artistic sensibility and the natural and austere beauty of this land. She has perfectly conveyed the enchanting atmosphere of these places, whether by highly photographic analysis, as here in this valley near Valdez, or by an introduced to a few essential lines in which the details disappear in the larger expanses. Here is Mount McKinley, the highest point in Alaska. Another side of Mount McKinley, which reveals here its majestic stature in a lake of eternity. Rarely has the notion of silence and of the suspension of time been expressed with such intensity.